Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to our Men's Week conference. This is the night of healing, men's health workshop. And I just want to reiterate the purpose of men's ministry is to reveal Jesus to all men in order that the God's kingdom will be manifested tangibly in their lives. The men's ministry seeks to sharpen and strengthen men through God's word, fellowship, encouragement, and support, as well as share Christ's love in tangible ways in our community. Our 3 goals for every man is to read the Bible daily and journal thoughts and prayers, join a small group for Bible study and accountability, and engage in personal ministry where he serves out the overflow of his relationship with Christ and his brothers. And I want to say that's an excellent thing that we should accomplish. I want to welcome everybody again. My name is Darian Williams. I'm one of the elders here at United Christian Faith Ministries. And I have such a pleasure tonight that we have our young brother that's studying our health, So I just want to thank him for coming out. As Dr. Newton is here. We also have one of our own pastors here, Brother Glover here. He's going to be talking as well. And we're going to be talking about men's health. And I just want to, before I introduce my brother and let him have the mic, I just want to talk a little bit about him. He's done many things. He's working at Pennington Biomedical Center right now. And a little bit of his background is that he's currently associate professor and director of physical activity and ethnic minority health laboratory at Pennington Biomedical Research Center. His research examines the effect of community-based lifestyles interventions on the health of African Americans. And a growing area of research is lifestyle intervention in older African Americans and its effect on cognitive functions. He has obtained federal, state, industry, and private foundation funding to support his research efforts. So let's give him a big hand of praise right now for him being here with us tonight. And I won't prolong it. With that being said, I'll turn it over to you, Doctor, and you can share, some of the things you would like to share. We're going to have like a round table discussion. We're going to have questions from our audience. And if we so have some that's coming online, we will ask those as well. So right now, I'll turn it over to you and tell us what you do and how you're going to impact our, community.
Okay. Well, is my mic on? Yeah, everybody can hear me. Great. How's everybody doing tonight? Good. So, as was stated, I work at the Pennington Biomedical Research Center, and the vast majority of the research that I do focuses on addressing health disparities in the African American community. And so the approach that I take is a community-based approach. So a lot of the research that we do, a lot of the work that we do involves the community. So we work with community entities like the YMCA, we work with churches, community centers, recreation departments. So we don't just do things at Pennington Center. We try to take our research to the population because this is where you all are, and so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for us to just do things solely at Pennington. So tonight what I'd like to do is I would like to provide some information, but I would also like to receive some information and stimulate some discussion amongst everybody who's here. So guys on stage, everybody who's in the audience, so let's make it interactive and feel free to ask questions whenever you want to. So how many of you know about health disparities? You know what that means? Anybody? If you know, raise your hand. Okay. So I'll tell you what a health disparity is. That's when one segment of the population has a higher prevalence of a condition than somebody else. than another segment of that population. So for example, African Americans there's a greater number of African Americans who are obese compared to Caucasian Americans and Hispanic Americans, okay? So that's an example of a health. You guys know of any other health disparities that pertain to the African American community?
I think one,
Sorry, we have high blood pressure. Exactly. Cholesterol, okay. Diabetes is another one, yes.
stress.
Stress, yes. We'll talk about stress because stress falls in its own category. But yes, you guys are right. So African Americans do have higher rates of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and obesity. So if we look at diabetes, about 12 to 14% of all African Americans have diagnosed diabetes. That doesn't include individuals who have it, but they don't know. You compare that to white Americans, where their prevalence rates are like 10% or 9%, okay? If you take obesity, 46% of African American females are obese, whereas you don't see that high of a number, and maybe down, 35% or so in white Americans. So strokes is another example. African Americans actually have 2 times the risk of developing stroke compared to white Americans. And 2 that you may not be aware of, but that are very important. One of those is cancer. So we know that prostate cancer is significantly higher in African American men than it is in men of other ethnic groups. And then the other one that is going to be very impactful for our society in a number of years is dementia, okay? So African Americans actually have 2 times the risk of developing dementia compared to people of other ethnic groups. So now that I've hit you with a lot of stats, the other thing, the problem with health disparities is not just that cardiovascular disease affects your heart, or that diabetes affects, your blood sugar levels and your insulin, but it's what those diseases end up resulting in. So diabetes ends up resulting in cardiovascular disease, kidney disease, blindness, amputations. So, and obviously, cancers result in death. We know that dementia results in a number of other health problems, and then slowly, you essentially lose your ability to function. You lose your ability to think and to remember things that happen to you. So it's very important that we do something about health disparities. Correct? Everybody agree? Okay. So, from the crowd, men on stage, what do you think we can do about health disparities?
Yes.
Okay. Educate the people. What else can we do? Okay. Do things to take better care of yourself. Anything else?
Turn your mic on.
When I say do things to take better care of yourself, I mean we can exercise, we can eat better, and just make sure that we're doing what we can to keep a reasonable blood sugar, keep our cholesterol down, and those type of things. Along with the education, finding out what becoming more understanding of what this is, and ways that we can prevent it within each, and then spread the word, just like you do.
Right.
Another thing I realized too, and I don't know if you've done any studies on this, but in correlation with the jobs that most African Americans deal with, on the occupational side, they're digging ditches, they're inhaling silica, they're in the places, hot areas, exposed to a lot more chemicals and other things like that. And I believe that that's one of the additional factors that later on in life they have chronic effects over time, and it will succumb to cancers as well.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily do research in that area, but I do believe that that's true, that your job status can certainly have an effect on your health, your mental health, and your physical health. That's very true. So any other thoughts from the audience about the things that we can do to prevent from getting health disparities? Yes. Okay? Get information from your doctor. Very good. We're going to come back to that one. Somebody remind me to come back to that one because it's relevant for African American men.
And I guess, like to say, if you have access to taking physicals, get those diagnoses, start developing a baseline for what you're dealing with, and then build upon that.
Yes, that's right. So regular doctor appointments are very important. So we mentioned a bunch of things. So there's your job status, or we'll sort of put that in stress. We'll put that in sort of like your determinants of health, okay? And then we talked about individual behaviors. So exercise, eating. There's other components to that. Sleep is another very important component to your health. So there's the behavioral component. And so the research that I do, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but the research that I do really talks about the behavioral things that we can do, okay? So I want to spend just a little bit of time talking about the behavioral aspects. So one thing that, Brother Glover mentioned was physical activity, okay? You're a physical activity expert.
Oh, I wouldn't say expert, but okay.
We're going to rely on some of your expertise here in a minute. Okay, so men in the audience, I have another question for you. How much exercise are you supposed to get? Since we're talking about information, how much exercise are you supposed to get?
Daily regimen.
30 minutes a day, okay. Anybody else? Anybody have any idea? A guess? Anything you heard on TV? How much exercise?
What they say, the minimum of 15 minutes of walking or cardio or something like that, or a little bit
Okay.
more.
15 minutes of cardio. Anybody else? Okay, I like that. That's good. An hour a day, 4 days out of the week. Okay. All right. So now we're going to go a little bit deeper. Okay. So we know that there's these recommendations. We've heard some guesses. And you said an hour a day, 4 days out of the week. And you said 30 minutes, right? Of what? So I'll give you a hint. What level, what intensity should you be doing?
Where you sweat, where you feel it, where you feel some exertions.
Okay. You feel some exertion when you sweat?
Yeah. Well, it depends.
Okay.
All right, because if you're an athlete and you're used to that, then high intensity may be a better thing for you. 30 minutes to 45 minutes, 3-4 times a day, and you can get what you need from there. There is most of us have watches and those kind of things, and you can monitor your levels, your heart rate and all that, and there's a way to figure all that out. I'm not going to go into all the calculations and all that, but there's a way to figure out where your heart rate should be according to your age and everything like that. So if you're sedentary, you want to at least start off with getting you some walking up and down the street. It can be 15 minutes or it can be, depending on where you are, it may take you 20 minutes to do a mile or half a mile or so. It depends on the individual. It depends on your activity level. But the best thing to do is at least get 30 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week. If you can do an hour, then great. But majority of people who are sedentary won't get that hour because they'll get either tired, they'll get discouraged or whatever have you, and they may not continue to do it day after day after day. So that's my take on how that works.
So you raised a number of good points, which is it depends, and more is better is another point that I think you raised. So our government recommends that we do 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity activity, okay? So moderate intensity is the equivalent of brisk walking. Brisk walking is walking 3 to 4 miles an hour, so you're walking a mile every 15 or 20 minutes, okay? So that would ordinarily make somebody sweat. You would feel some exertion from doing that. You get to the point to where you can talk, but you can't sing, okay? That's when you know you're at moderate intensity. You're at vigorous when you can't sing. You can't do anything other than just focus on what you're doing. That's when you get to vigorous. So that's the recommendation, and that recommendation is based on a lot of science that shows that when people engage in 150 minutes of aerobic activity, well, I should say this as well. Our government also recommends that you do 2 days of strength training, okay? Now, a lot of you will be saying, hey, that requires a gym where you gotta go and you gotta, do the bench press, do some squats, do large muscle activities. It doesn't necessarily require a gym membership to do these kinds of things, okay? So you can get exercise bands, and you can work out with exercise bands. You'll be doing sit-ups, you can be doing push-ups. Anything that's putting load on large muscles is considered strength training exercise, okay? And so this is something interesting that speaking of push-ups, they did a study about a year ago, and they said that, well, let me ask you guys this. How many of you in this room think you can do more than 10 push-ups?
Correct push-ups.
Right, correct push-ups. Okay. How many of you think you can get 20? 30? 40? There's some confident men in this room. 50? Wow. 60? Okay, we're going to have a push-up contest because I'm just not believing this. But anyway, so they did a study, and they showed that men who can do 10 push-ups, 10, if you're able to just do 10, you have a lower risk of dying from cardiovascular disease, okay? So that could be a benchmark for you if you can do 10. Personally, I have this on tape. I was able to do 50 without stopping. Now, so that's why we're going to do a push-up contest at the end, because I want to see who else can hang with me. But anyway, so yes, the recommendation is 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous aerobic activity and 2 days of strength training, okay? And this is, again, based on scientific evidence that shows when people adhere to this kind of recommendation, that they end up having lower mortality, less risk for cardiovascular disease, less risk for diabetes, less risk for stroke. So physical activity has a lot of physical benefits. It also has a lot of mental benefits. Okay, so we know people who do more physical activity, less depressed, less anxious, report a higher quality of life. Okay? So that's one behavioral component. The other behavioral component that we often study is your diet. Okay? And so I'm sure that you guys have heard a lot of different things about diet, and diets are constantly changing, and there's this fad diet this week and another fad diet next week, and all sorts of things. And so obviously at the Pennington Center, we've done some studies to look at different kinds of diets and to figure out which ones help people to lose weight, which ones help people to lower their risk of this disease or that disease. So, in general, when we bring people into the Pennington Center and we essentially try to train them on how to, or teach them skills on how to improve their diet, a lot of this really centers on decreasing the amount of food that you're consuming, decreasing the amount of fat that you're consuming, okay? Those are really the two pillars. Of course, you have to figure out where your starting level is, but if you decrease the amount of fat, you decrease the amount of calories, and you do other things, increasing your fruit and vegetable intake, increasing your protein intake to some extent, and watching your carbohydrate intake, then these things lead to weight loss and health improvements, essentially. So, got a question for you guys, there's another one. In terms of vegetables, how many cups of vegetables should you have a day? 2, 1? At least one, okay? I see way in the back, I see 10. 10.
10? He like vegetables.
2.5. Okay, anybody else? Okay, so how many cups of vegetables do you guys actually consume?
Less than one.
Less than one, okay. So the recommendation, yeah, it depend, and again, this depends, but it's around 2.5 to 3 cups, okay? So let's summarize some of this. Oh, and sleep. Let's get to sleep real quick. How many hours of sleep are you supposed to get every night? 6 to 8. I hear 8. Somebody said 7. Did I hear 7? You are correct. 7. That's what the recommendation is. You're supposed to get at least 7 hours of sleep, okay? So let's review some of this real quickly before we move on to some social determinants of health conversations. Okay, by a show of hands, how many of you have hypertension or cardiovascular disease diagnosed? 1, 2, 3, 4. How many men do we have in here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 16. Okay, so 4 out of 16, so we're about 25%. How many of you have diabetes? Diagnosable diabetes. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Yeah, 1, 2, 3. How many of you have had a stroke? Nobody? That's great. Anybody with a family history of cardiovascular disease? Put myself there. All right. How about a family history of diabetes? Okay, so that's a lot. That's about half. Okay. Anybody with dementia in their family? All right, about 3 or 4. Okay. So if you have a family member, especially if it's a nuclear family member, with any of those conditions, you are at high risk for developing that condition. And so I'm at risk for developing dementia and diabetes because it's in my family. And so knowing this as a young child, that my family had these disorders, I tried to become physically active. This was probably when I was, in junior high school. I had been physically active when I was a kid just because I liked it, but I tried more and more when I was in junior high school and realized some of these issues were passed down through the family. So how many of you are exercising 150 minutes a week of aerobic activity? Let's not even count the strength training. How many of you guys do 150 minutes of aerobic activity a week?
Not consistently.
Not consistently. Okay, you guys who do, what are you doing to get these 150 minutes? Okay, what kind of sports? Pickle. That's where I know you from, pickleball. Okay. Personal trainer. Okay, great. The treadmill. All right, great. So I don't think, I think I get close to 150 minutes, but I don't think I get it. Between tennis and running, I get close to 150 minutes, but I don't know that I actually get a total of 150 minutes a week. What about sleep? How many of you guys sleep more than 7 hours a night? Nobody. Okay, goal for all of you guys is to get 7 hours of sleep a night. Figure out a way through some modification of your schedule to get 7 hours of sleep a night. I need to do the same thing. I think if I look at my phone, I think I average like 5 hours of sleep a night, which is it's way too low. It's not enough, and I feel it. Okay, so if you're not meeting the physical activity guidelines, I encourage you to find ways to increase your physical activity. If you're not meeting the dietary guidelines, I encourage you guys to go look at, I'm blanking on the website. myplate.gov. If you go to myplate.gov, it gives you all the recommendations for your age and your gender about your dietary intake in terms of fruits, vegetables, proteins, carbs, and how to avoid fats and those sorts of things. So I'll give you real quick some of the strategies. And if you're not getting 7 hours of sleep, definitely make sure that you get 7 hours of sleep. You would be surprised at the conditions that lack of sleep is related to. So a few different strategies that we use to help people to change their behavior so that they can meet these guidelines. One of the main things that we teach people to do is to monitor your activity. Okay, so Brother Glover talked about how we all have watches and devices. How many of you guys have either a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or some other device to monitor your behavior? Raise your hand if you have one. Okay, so those of you who don't, consider it. We'll tell you that these things are great for monitoring your activity. So I can look at my Apple Watch right now and tell you how many steps I've gotten today. It's probably about 4,000, which is well below the recommendation of 10,000 steps a day, but tracks my heart rate, steps, activity that I do, okay? So self-monitoring is very important. We also teach people to be accountable to somebody, okay? So gain some level of social support, whether that's a friend, family member, somebody who you can be accountable to, and that you can let them know, like, hey, you know, I'm going to the gym today, or they can check up on you. Hey, did you go? Social support is very important, okay? We also teach people to set goals, okay? So if you're totally sedentary, you're not getting any physical activity as of right now or the last month, it doesn't make sense to set the goal of 150 minutes like next week. You're just not going to do it. You'll end up being sore by Tuesday. You'll be sore Tuesday to Thursday, and you won't want to do it anymore. So gradual increase in your activity. So if you have none right now, then next week set a goal of 30 minutes. Just go out, walk 10 minutes 3 days out of the week, and then gradually build up to 150, okay? So goal setting is very important. It could be weight loss. It could be your own levels. So, you know, your glucose is at 100. You're not at the diabetic level, but you want to lower it. You want to lower it to about 90, okay? So set that as your goal, reduce your sugar intake. We also teach people about stimulus control, like putting things in your environment that helps you to remember what you're supposed to be doing, okay? So your gym bag, don't put it in your closet. Put it in your car. Put it by your door. That helps you to remember to do your physical activity. My gym bag is in my trunk right now, okay? Every time I go to my trunk, I see my gym bag. When you are at home, don't have the Twinkies out on the counter, okay? Put the fruits and the vegetables out on the counter, because that's what you'll see, and that's what you'll reference, okay? So that's what we mean by stimulus control, things that get your mind thinking about the behavior change that you're supposed to be doing. On my watch, I have a timer set for when I'm supposed to go to bed, 10:30, okay? So it's a reminder every day at 10:30. When that goes off, I'm like, okay, I got to get to bed. I got to stop doing whatever I'm doing and make preparations to go to bed, okay? So we teach people these strategies. And we did a study, and we asked African American men specifically what they wanted in a physical activity program, okay? Because we were trying to develop a physical activity program. So you guys are all African American men. If I said to you, what is it that you need to start a physical activity program, what would it be?
Well, I'd say as just general knowledge. You know, sometimes people want to do or start, but they don't really know what or where or what this particular item works on, or that type of thing. And then I would also say gyms are great. Don't get me wrong, I belong to a gym. But I think one of the other things that may be needed is some type of equipment at home. It doesn't have to be a bench. It can be a weighted ball. There's a lot of things that can be done with a kettlebell. And if we have just those small items at the house, then it lessens the excuse. Well, I didn't get to the gym. Well, we could do a little something at the house. So I think that those two items would be a really good thing to have.
I think developing a plan, you know, starting off what you want to do and decide the times that you want to do that and put those things in perspective. I think that would be a starting point there, because with a plan, you're more apt to do something than without a plan.
Right. Planning. Never fail to plan, never plan to fail. What else do you guys need? Yeah, I think that's very important. Anybody else?
I would say variety for me.
Let me let you
Figuring
speak.
out different ways to maybe work on the same kind of muscle grouping or skill set versus, I know for me, if I'm doing the bench press all the time, You know, after 3 times, I'm less motivated to do it again because it's not new, it's not fresh. So having different ideas and options to be add various activities.
Okay. Variety. Anybody else?
I believe if we actually had a program set up that men can see, hey, every Tuesday, every Thursday, this is the program that is set up that we can come out and work out together. And going back to what Brother Chris said, have somebody there to push us or to lead us in those exercises in terms of getting more fit.
Okay, great. So having something set up. Anybody else? Okay, so when we just sat down with African American men and we asked them this very question, and the things that they told us were they needed accountability. So similar to what you said, I need somebody to hold me accountable to what I'm doing. The men also said that they needed a facility, like they needed a place to work out, which to some extent speaks to what you're saying is having regular groups. Now, these groups don't necessarily have to be in a facility. They could be out in the community, but just having that group, that regular set schedule that people know is going to happen that they can attend to. You know, the men also indicated that they were really interested in doing some sort of weight training. And I don't know if that's of interest to you guys, but we found that that was something that the men really resonated to. In other focus groups that we did, we heard something similar to, again, what you said was competition. Like, the men wanted to be able to basically have a system set up where they could compete with other men and be able to communicate with those other men about the competition and how things were going. So you guys are saying things that were similar to what other African American men have said that they needed. And so essentially what we did was we developed a program where we gave them a facility, we gave them somebody to be accountable to, and we set up a program, a regular program where they could go to the YMCA when they wanted to. And that program resulted in the men increasing their fitness 11%, which is significant. If you increase the amount of oxygen that your body is sending throughout the body, the efficiency of it, by 11%, that can bring you from a very low fit category to an average fitness category. Okay, so that's very important. We also found that these men decreased their waist circumference. Why is waist circumference important? Like, who cares? Because that's where your abdominal fat is, okay? And abdominal fat is related to cardiovascular disease, and diabetes, and obesity. So reducing that, we were able to reduce their percent body fat to a level that reduced their risk of developing further disease. We also increased the efficiency of their pancreas. But your pancreas, why is that important? Because your pancreas helps to moderate the amount of glucose that flows through your body, okay? Lowering the risk for developing diabetes, controlling your blood sugar, okay? So you guys are saying things that are very similar to what we found in other African American men. So again, if you are not meeting these recommendations for either sleep, diet, or physical activity, I encourage you to access websites, access information, you know, use some of the tips that I talked about in order to increase your ability to meet these thresholds, because it is very important for your health. Okay, now.
I have a question
Yeah.
my wife wanted to ask. She said, will you define the difference between cardiorespiratory fitness and metabolic syndrome?
Yes, I will. So cardiorespiratory fitness is the ability of your body system to deliver oxygen throughout your body, okay? So it's really an oxygen system is what we're talking about with cardiorespiratory fitness. When you're talking about the metabolic syndrome, you're talking about a syndrome that's compiled of 5 different components to the metabolic syndrome. And if I can remember them correctly, it is abdominal obesity, maybe high LDL, low HDL, and there's 2 more components, but I can't remember. I'm sorry, off the top of my head.
That's fine.
But so one is really a syndrome that is associated with like insulin resistance, and the other is really your body's ability to deliver oxygen throughout the body.
Okay.
That's the difference. So I'll pause right now. Does anybody have any questions? Nope.
I don't have a question on exercise. I have a question on dementia. Why does it occur, and can it be prevented?
So, we are unsure about why it occurs. We know that there are a number of things that are associated with dementia or an increased risk of developing dementia, and the things that I talked about. So, we know that people who don't exercise enough have an increased risk of developing dementia. We know that people who are overweight have an increased risk of developing dementia. Cardiovascular disease increases your risk of developing different dementias. So we know that there are factors that are associated with it. We don't fully know why it develops. Is there a way to prevent it? As of right now, no. Not that we know it, but we're investigating different ways to reduce your risk of developing dementia and potentially slow the development of it, okay? So let me back up just a little bit. So when I say dementia, dementia is just think about that as an umbrella term, okay, for cognitive dysfunction. And what that means is your thinking, your processing skills, your memory, those things begin to decline at a rapid rate, okay? There are a number of different conditions under dementia. Alzheimer's disease is probably the most commonly known dementia, but there are other dementias related to Parkinson's disease, there's vascular dementia, so there's other kinds of dementias, but 90% of all dementias are Alzheimer's. We are investigating ways to prevent dementia at Pennington through a number of different studies. We actually have 2 studies that are going on right now that focus specifically on older African Americans, meaning African Americans 65 years to 85 years old, okay? And it's a physical activity intervention, and I have information about the study in the packets that you guys will each receive at the end. So we're studying it, but as of right now, we don't know all of the causes. We have some targets, if you will, and we have some studies that are going on. So any health-related questions, it doesn't just have to be about physical activity and diet. If you had other questions related to overall health, men's health, African-American men's health, I'm free to answer those questions too.
Another question that came about was what you call a FACET program. Are you familiar with the FACET program? Where fathers and children exercise together. Is there any special type of exercise that you would recommend for fathers and their children to do together?
I'm not familiar with that program, but I would recommend that fathers do exercises that their children find enjoyable. Yeah. That would be my recommendation. And that's partly, well, that's all based on just my own personal opinion, yeah. Because of having children and engaging in the activities that they enjoy. I think that's a great program, actually. There's actually some studies that show that when fathers and their sons or their daughters engage in programs together, it ends up in benefit for both of them. So fathers and children, if they get involved in a weight loss program, that you get better results from them exercise or working out and eating better together than if they each did it alone, okay? So yeah, that father's program is very important. Fathers are extremely important to their children's health.
Also, I want to tag on that. It doesn't always have to be basketball. I'm not saying that that's not a good one. That's very good. But it doesn't always have to be basketball or something like that. It can be like, for instance, we did a program with the little young kids, and it's an obstacle. We get the little blow-up obstacle runs, and you run through there with them. And all they know is they're running, they're climbing obstacles, but they're literally exercising. So I basically, depending on the age of the individual, the child, the more fun I don't want to say exercise yet, but the more fun the activity is, the more exercise you both will get. So if it's just chasing the dog around the yard, whatever have you, the constant moving, the constant physicalness of it is what gets the results that you're looking for. But the fun is what makes it the kid or the child more apt to want to be a part of it.
Yep, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Hey, good evening.
Good evening.
Got a question. My mom, dad, sister, twin sister, and myself. At 22, I got diagnosed with high blood pressure, hypertension. I'm at the point in my life where I eat well, train, college basketball, run a lot. But I tried everything to get rid of it. My question is, I have kids coming up, so I'm trying to, their diets and the way they eat. Like you said, a lot of times we take them outside, we play. I put them in sports. Not too much candy and processed foods. So the goal is, as they're coming up, what can I do to help them to not go through what I'm going through? As far as, I even went to the doctor as far as trying to get off the blood pressure medicine. I've been a police 19 years, and when I'm at work, it's one level. When I'm off, it's lower. It might be 122 over 69, 79 when I'm home. I'm at work, it's 149 over 89. I have two of them. But even when I don't want to work out, I stop eating red meats, beef, not too much fried foods. I eat fried foods the other day and I was sick to the stomach. So I'm doing the best that I can, even with prayer and God. So what can you give me on as I'm raising my kids as far as not to, the doctor says it's kind of genetic. You know, mom started at a young age. She says 19, 18. Twin sister, 18, 19. Myself, 22, but I skipped it to 32. Could have blew my kidneys out. I thought it was a game, but I realized it could have made me really sick. So just trying to help my kids, and what can I do better or more to in that process?
I think that's a great question. And I do think that there's a level of irritability that you're fighting, because it is within your family. So I think one of the major things you can do for your children is to continue to model a healthy lifestyle. So continuing to exercise on a regular basis, involving them with the exercise, encouraging them to exercise. And I think something that's just invaluable is to watch the salt intake, because that's one of the major things that is going to drive your blood pressure up. And so modeling for them low salt intake, reduced fat intake, I think is going to be very important. The other thing that you mentioned was stress. And yes, you're right, stress levels, we didn't get to that yet, but yes, stress will drive up your blood pressure. I can tell you that when I'm at work, I'm sure that my blood pressure is about as high as yours is. And so modeling good stress management techniques, okay? So if that's deep breathing that you want to model for your children, if it, continued exercise, if it's problem-focused coping, okay? So as opposed to emotion-focused coping. So identifying the problem, finding realistic, reasonable ways to address the problem, and any other stress management techniques that you can model for your children, I think is going to be key for them. So making sure that you watch your salt intake and monitoring and modeling low salt intake for your children, continuing to exercise, engaging in exercise with them, managing your stress, I think are going to be key things for you and your family.
If I may, one of the, and this is for everybody, but it could help you all as well in your family. One of the best things for helping stress as well as exercise, believe it or not, is stretching. So people don't think of stretching as a exercise, but if you do it right, you can feel sore, especially if you haven't been doing it. So there's dynamic stretching. If you doing stretching and let's say you get ready to run, you may do some hops, skips down, something related to what you're going to do. But static stretching is what I'm talking about. So if you're doing some static stretching early in the morning before you get started, or late at night before you go to bed, you're doing static stretching to the point to where you're holding each stretch for at least 20 seconds. And it helps the blood flow. It helps loosen up all the muscles, and it really helps you sleep at night as well. But it helps you get your day started. And so if we're teaching our kids, our spouses, ourselves on to make sure that we're stretching. Think about it like this. Who has stairs in their house? Okay, so maybe you go up them a lot, but those who don't go up a lot, when you get ready to go up the stairs, you feel kind of stiff or whatever have you. If you take a few moments before you go up the stairs, try it next time. If you don't use your stairs often, before you go up the stairs, take a few minutes, look crazy, and just do some little lunges on the steps to stretch up. I guarantee you when you go up, just that moment, when you go up the stairs, it's going to be a lot easier. It's because we don't do it often. Anything we don't do often in the physical realm, it's hard. So my wife says a lot, I pick this up and it hurts, my back hurt or whatever. It's because you don't lift that type of weight on a regular basis. So if we stretch more on a daily basis, it will help the blood flow, it will help the oxygen level, and as well, it'll help our mobility. So I said that to say, if you add that to your exercise routine, your eating routine, it also will help you.
Can you talk to, I know you mentioned earlier about the statistics, but what's the average age now in the African American community when it comes to cardiovascular disease? Do you have any stats on that?
That's a good question that I don't know the answer to, but I suspect that it is early 40s. Yes. Yeah, that would be my guess. Yep.
You talked about Afro-Americans having the health disparities more than Caucasian. Is there a primary reason or primary cause why that's so? It's like the food we eat, less exercise. Is there something primary that causes that maybe can help everybody?
So there's a number of different things. It is not meeting the physical activity recommendations. It is eating high-fat foods, high-salt foods, too much food, just in general, which causes weight gain, which results in obesity. But and lack of sleep as well, not meeting those recommendations. There's also access to health care. Okay, so we know that African Americans have less access to health care, and this is largely a result of economic disparities. Not going to see the doctor, okay? Let's be honest with ourselves, we're men, we don't like going to see the doctor. And there's an inherent feeling of something is wrong with me, I'm deficient, I'm not what I should be if I have to go see the doctor. And we as African Americans tend to go to the doctor really late in disease progress, okay? So whereas, this is just an example, whereas a Caucasian American is going to go see the doctor when they start feeling symptoms, they go, okay, well, you've got stage 1 cancer. An African American goes to the doctor, we're at stage 3 or 4, okay? Access to health care. Trust in the medical system, okay? Which partly relates to not going to the doctor as much. We know that Tuskegee happened. We know that the situation with Henrietta Lacks happened. We know that there's other atrocities. And so these things have led to distrust of the medical community. There is institutional racism. We know that institutional racism causes a whole host of problems for African Americans that are related to health disparities. So a good example is, these policies that essentially result in residential segregation. And when you have residential segregation, you have certain parts of a community that have access to things, access to better hospitals, easier, closer access to the hospitals, better foods. And then in the communities that are across the tracks or that are segregated, you don't have those things as accessible, okay? And so that results in health disparities. There's a long list of things that result in health disparities. And so we talked a lot about and I should say, stress, again, is a contributor. So I talked about the things that we can do sort of immediately. Everybody in this room can, tonight after this talk, can go for a walk. There's certain things we can do, okay? We can improve our diet. There's other things that take a lot longer of a process, okay? And so doing something about your beliefs about the healthcare system and going to your doctor. Those may take a little bit longer. Or dealing with institutional racism. Or there's all these social determinants of health. Like you were talking about stress. Well, we know that stress and culture and economics and education, quality of your education, and in addition to years of education, these are the social things that are around us that we deal with that we're disadvantaged in. Okay? We don't make as much money per dollar. You know, if we had the same job, we make less money compared to white Americans. Okay? So that gives us less power in a sense. Okay? So there's a lot of things that are going to take time to resolve, and there's some things that we can do today. So I focused a little bit more on the things we can do today, but there are many, many different causes for health disparities.
Well, if I can add just to that, well, a lot of us in the room grew up, our culture, we grew up in the taste as opposed to the health. It tastes good. And so, you know, fried chicken, you know, stuff that mama, big mama, and everybody else gonna make. And those are some of the things we really need to back away from now. It's not too late. I always say that it's never too late as long as you're here. You have another breath. It's time. And we can do this now. And I want to speak to the young man when a couple of you all said having someone around. You know, it's not, you don't always have to go to the gym. You can join little outfits. 3 of you all can get together. I think he said he's a personal trainer. You can get together. He can have a little session out in the parking lot or whatever have you, and you can really get what you need in that small arena. You can get on the program for 2-3 weeks. One of the reasons I became a group fitness trainer is because I was seeing people in my family with diabetes. They was dying. My father had amputation and just all kind of stuff. And we can do something about it. We just got to get with it and stick with it. The problem is usually not starting it. How many of you all have started the exercise program at least this year? You started something. How about within the last year, 2 years? You started some kind of exercise program. Well, I ain't seeing a lot of hands. That's part of our problem right there. We should, at least in 3 years, most of us should have started some kind of exercise program, but we don't stick with it. And you're right, accountability. So if we get connected, I know Pastor always trying to get something started here so that the men could be and the women could be, all of us can be more healthier. If you get in a group and we can just do some calisthenics or whatever have you, we'll bring out our kettlebells or whatever, but if you continue it on for at least 6 to 8 weeks, you know, if you do it for 30 days, a routine, it'll stick with you. But we just gotta make up in our minds to just do it and live longer.
And I think, too, being self-aware, I realize today, you know, we talk about stress, but many of us are under stress, but we don't realize we're under stress because we cope a lot. And I think that's a great thing where we have to start educating ourselves as to what we're experiencing. You know, so that's one of the greatest things that you mentioned is education. Education is important. And we're getting close to our time period, but I would like for you to talk about some of the studies that maybe might be inviting for some of these guys to participate in the near future, or do you have something now that maybe could aid us in the African-American community?
Right, so just overall, I would encourage every one of you to go to our website to find out all the studies that are going on at Pennington. Nobody can retain all the different studies. They change, and there's a lot of them. So www.pbrc, like Pennington Biomedical Research Center, .edu. I have the pamphlets here. I want everybody to get one of the pamphlets because we have information on some of our studies. The 2 main studies that I have going on are for African Americans 65 years and older. So some of you in here are not 65 or older, but please tell somebody that you know who's over 65 about these programs. We're comparing 2 different kinds of physical activity to determine if these physical activity programs will reduce risk factors for dementia. Okay, it's a year-long program. You know, you guys mentioned some things. So a consistent program. We're going to have a consistent program for people. They'll know that at this day and this time they can come, they can exercise with us. Accountability, because it's group-based. It is going to be in person. We're going to have people wearing masks. We're going to have people 10-foot distance. We're going to have you in a room all by yourself, so it's not like you're going to have people passing by. Everybody who comes in has got to be checked for COVID. So there's a COVID screener that happens. We don't take your blood. We just ask you questions, take your temperature. So, and we clean all of the devices that you would be using, whatever equipment you would be using, we clean those things. So we have those studies going on, and so they're in the pack, and I encourage you guys to look. We also have a number of diabetes, weight loss, even sleep studies that are going on at Pennington.
Okay. I want to give Pastor opportunity to write quick.
Come on, let's give God a praise for our panelists tonight, our guests, Dr. Newman, trainer, physical therapist, Minister Glover. Two things I want to add for men of faith. Proverbs 17 says, a merry heart is like medicine. For men who deal with high blood pressure and stress, also consider the attitudinals of life. Consider the things that may stress you because of your thought life. Money, racism, ignorance. Solomon even said, to know wisdom and knowledge became vanity and vexation to me. Merry heart. I'll keep them in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee. Another biblical concept to consider. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, the Bible says, your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. In other words, your body belongs to God. So whatever issue you're facing, people of faith, go to God concerning it. Have no fear. Take in consideration all the things that God expects of us as far as maintaining these 11 systems of the body. Become knowledgeable. Become wise. Wisdom is principle, therefore get wisdom. We've been challenged to get wisdom this week. Get wisdom concerning your health. Your body belongs to God, so start caring for it, taking care of it, drinking water, resting, listening to the Holy Spirit. Keep your heart merry. Find ways to laugh every day. And if it's hard, just look at somebody to the right or to the left of you. Should be something to laugh at. All right. Challenge others. You're going to hear from us as a ministry going forward. Walks monthly, quarterly from the church. We're going to challenge you to embrace the disciplines God requires of us as we live this life to the glory of God. Amen.
Amen.
Come on, for those who are watching here, come on, put your hands together again for our guest tonight. Thank you, Elder Darren Williams, for leading this. We're going to be transitioning to those who are watching online. I pray you were blessed by what you heard. We got to get a gift for both our guests tonight. Thank you again for your knowledge and your investment in health and wellness in not only our community, but all communities in the world. So God bless you tonight. This will conclude our session tonight. And we're going to transition and get ready for our Zoom session with Bishop Roderick Hennings, all the way from Buffalo, New York. We'll be sharing with married men, single men. Brother Valentino will be hosting that Zoom as well. All right? Elder Williams, anything?
I don't have anything else. I just want to thank you for attending. And those of you online, let's stay connected, get associated with someone, and get busy. And thank you, Dr. Newton, for your time this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed it.
Very good information.